Awesome. Well, good morning. My name is Aaron Brown from Workforce Equanimity, and we have my partner in crime.
I'm Dr. Larry Hiner. Good morning.
Hope all is well. So, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're looking at commitment and accountability and teaming.
Okay.
Kind of individual versus team accountability and individual actions. So we're going to talk a little bit about when individual accountability and commitment actually destroys the team results, and accountability blindsides the team mindfulness, and how we can use team mindfulness to recreate that sense of accountability for the team. Clarity in team goals and why that's important, and team accountability and leader accountability, and what some of those differences are, and how those impact results as well. So,
Nice.
when we're talking about individual commitment and accountability, I don't know, over the last many years, individual accountability has been the key, right?
Correct.
So you're held accountable. Your performance reviews are like what Aaron has done and what Aaron has achieved, and how much you've met your performance objectives, and which ones that you haven't, and how you can make that difference. And then somebody else on your team comes in, and they're evaluated, and I'm evaluated, and whatever the team individuals are evaluated and measured, and then what happens then? Your compensation is based on your performance.
Yep, correct.
And on your individual performance, and so you get compensated, you get measured that way, you get rewarded or punished in that way. Either you get an advance or not, or in the worst case, maybe you get stepped back. But it's all on your individual performance. And what we like to encourage at Workforce Equanimity when we're working with companies is to start looking at the team and the accountability of the team rather than the individual. I wonder, I think you had an example about how when an individual is looking at their accountability, and their performance versus the team performance, how that affects that.
Yeah, so a thought I had was New Edition, awesome R&B group, phenomenal songs I still listen to this day. And it made me think of Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown, phenomenal artist, musician. And what we've noticed through watching this series, of course, and there's a lot of reflection on some things that have happened behind the scenes, is Bobby liked to do his thing his own unique way. And there are various different shows where it turned into, the image was Bobby Brown featuring New Edition. And that was a prime example of just commitment to himself versus commitment to the teams. Now you have division in the team. Now you have conflict. Now you have arguments, kind of making me think of the performance reviews you were speaking of earlier. You now have various different performance reviews, but they're now not speaking the same language. And what we have seen in that one group, there was separation. Music got put on hold. Everyone kind of went their own separate way before they came back together to do another show. Right. But it really hurt the group. It hurt the fans. I would have to say it even as a group hurt the revenue as when it came to the group level. And that was one example of what happens when one person says I versus how can we continue to focus on this thing as a group.
Yeah. I think that we've heard a lot of stories, and it's been in popular media, certainly movies and television, whatever, and stories about particularly artists and sports figures and people who should be teaming. You would expect them to be teaming, but they are so focused on their individual performance. And there's stories like in Olympic teams and such, and they go off. And there's this real tension between individual performance, because we're taught to do that and we're taught to excel individually. But the team then, as you say, suffers. And then there are, in the Olympics, there are team scores in addition to the individual scores. So the team suffers in that situation. So in the sports and performing artists and those people who need to have that level of performance that is superior, they extend into that. But we see it every day in the workplace then too. It kind of filters down to that where it's expected that individuals do the best that they can, that they be the best people that they can and perform the best job that they can. And they get measured and evaluated that way. But then how is the team then held accountable for the team goals? If we switch that paradigm from individual performance to the team performance, that's a real shift in the dynamic of how I behave as an individual in that team. And I think that's where that blindsides, that individual performance, comes in and corrupts and interferes with team mindfulness, team effectiveness, and a sense of team. Have you been on a team where that's happened? In work.
I would say I've been on a few, right? So it's kind of makes me think what you said earlier. It's let's say if I do extremely well, I get the accolades for doing well, but now what happens to the other teams that maybe aren't doing as well? And I thought I was having when you were speaking is collectively in the sales space, the location is stack ranked, right? It's not just the individual, it's the whole entire location. How do we perform together? And often we like to pride the best, right? But end of the day, it's no matter what you do, everyone is needed to be this cohesive team to get to where these goals might land or be.
Yeah. So we walk into offices and then there are all these posters around about no I in team and all this team pulling together and that kind of thing. And yet the performance measurements and the expectations are all placed on the individual and the individual measurements as opposed to the team measurements. Now that rolls up then into goals for the team, and then whose desk does that sit on?
Yeah.
Is the manager, right? So they're looking at that, and currently the strategy most of the time is then trying to enhance individual performance to try to bring up the level of all of the individuals so that the team can do well, this group of people can do well. And what we're talking about at Workforce Equanimity is we're saying there's also a sense of teaming that can be developed without without relying on the individual performance for the only measurement. Now, certainly individual performance is going to be key, but then there's also how does the team work together, and how is there a sense of team and team mindfulness that accelerates and enhances those individual performances. And it reduces that competitiveness, and particularly in a sales environment. We've walked in and where there's sales teams that are supposed to be teams. You can see that often like car dealerships. If you've gone to buy a car and you drive up and it's like whose turn is next, but somebody comes right up and helps you out.
Well, let's take it a step further for a moment. So sorry to cut you off there. So you got me excited. So I'm thinking, let's go car dealership for a moment, right? So we have the mindfulness piece discovered, and let's say we have that competitive nature. I have to sell cars. Larry needs to sell these cars.
Right.
How do we create team buy-in so we're playing on the same battlefield?
Right. Well, we have to recognize how interacting as a team is going to help. The saying is a rising tide floats all boats. So if we can collectively raise the tide, if we can collectively make the experience, the customer experience, and enhance that and make it better, then we'll all experience better sales.
Okay.
It'll come out of that. We'll certainly have to perform as individuals, but let's say, I know you've got a different kind of a sales style than I have, okay, and we're working in the same place. And I come across folks, it's my turn up or whatever, but we come in and we see, this customer is really going to be an Aaron type customer, or this customer is going to be a Larry type customer, or this, So on the team, we say, with this particular customer, their expectations and the way that they work, it really would be better if if Aaron worked with them than if I worked with them. So I, kind of introduce them to you and take that over. That's just a small example of that. Also, I think that one of the cores is the performance measurement, because then still at the end of the month in a sales dealership, if we're measured on individual sales, I'm going to be reticent to let that go. So I'm going to try to act like Aaron, right?
Fake it till you make it.
Right, but I'm probably going to fail with that and not connect with that customer in the same way that you could. And in that case, probably the dealership would then lose the sale. They're going to go someplace else where they find an Aaron. So that happens all the time. So, particularly in sales, but it happens on manufacturing floors. It happens in accounting departments. It happens, everywhere in call centers and support areas. So it's not just, we're not picking on car salespeople, but it happens there, and we're not picking on sports figures and that kind of thing. But those are examples I think that we can all think of. So I guess then the question becomes, how do we get, on those teams, how do we act as individuals on a team in order to enhance that sense of team mindfulness?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of a previous, a couple of weeks ago, Lawrence and I, we talked about utilizing everyone's strengths and uniquenesses, right?
Right.
So you're right-handed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm left-handed.
Right.
There are some differences there, but there's a strength there, right? If we utilize my left and your right hand, we can do greater things together. And I'm thinking as a leader, being intentional about using these unique strengths, calling them out as strengths, and therefore using them together instead of saying we need another Dr. Larry, we need another Aaron. No, you need the uniquenesses that you hired these people to use when it comes to the workforce, right? It makes me think of the car salesmanship or womanship that you discussed a moment ago. It's your sales style might be different. People buy from people, people work from people. There are some customers that might be better fit with you. There are some customers that might be better fit with me. End of the day, if we choose to proactively discover and yet utilize that, it opens up so much greater opportunities for the business.
Mm-hmm. But that presupposes that those scenarios that you're talking about, that we have the emotional intelligence then to make that determination about what the customer style is going to be and what our styles are and how they blend together and fit together. So as individuals, we need that information. And then as a manager, needing that information, as you were talking about, assembling the right team, the set of people, in order to accomplish particular tasks. That requires a level not only of knowing what a person's technical capabilities are, but knowing on an emotional intelligence level how that person interacts and how they work and their work styles, and if this work on this particular team and this particular project suits them, if they're going to be best for this or for something else, which is going to require flexibility in the organization to move people around more than being rigid report to type departments. Is going to be more of what we used to call a matrixed environment before the Matrix came out, which I understand is going to get rebooted.
Yeah, sit back in the chair again.
Yeah. So I don't know who's going to play Lawrence Fishburne, but
I think you should do it. Just thinking.
Okay. Red or the blue?
Both.
Yeah. So we've got a matrix environment where we say, all right, everybody works in this matrix, and maybe they report to this manager for developing their individual learning plan and for other things that are mandatory management kinds of things in a company, and there are those. They direct report there, but in terms of their work, they're working on this team and this team and this, and this project and this project and this project, which are then managed in teams. And even in a small organization, to be able to shift that around is important. The individual then needs to come with a sense of that emotional intelligence, but they also need to clarify what their expectations are going to be and be clear about what their technical capabilities are and their work styles, and whether they are comfortable with this. And I don't want to make it a touchy-feely thing, I'm comfortable with this job, thank you, and I'll do it. But that it's less stressful. It's more on the motivating side. It's going to create an internal motivation where that person's going to work well in a team, as opposed to creating a lot of stress, which means, say, as their manager, they're going to show up in your office all the time, or the performance is going to lag and the whole team performance lags, right? So being clear about what is the expectation of me working on this, and does it suit my work style, and is it compatible with that, is an essential component for the individual to do, right? Mm-hmm. So knowing that is part of it, and being able to get to that. And of course, it's some of the work that we do at Workforce Equanimity is helping people about that. But we're also talking about managers, and we've been chatting about that a little bit, about management of teams and how that dynamic works differently here in this paradigm versus the old school way of managing. So then you're finding the right people, and you're putting them in the right place, and you're setting up the environment for the team to be accountable. Now, some team leaders, then managers or not, but team leaders, then start taking that on themselves. Oh, I'm the project team leader, so I must be accountable for this, and I've got to make everybody, perform well
to my standard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've then set up a dynamic where the leader's accountability winds up being more important than the team sense of accountability. That needs to shift. Okay, the entire team, including the leader, the name, whoever the project leader is, the entire team needs to be accountable for that. That's going to require a basic shift in some of our compensation models, though. I mean, we talked earlier about compensation, mm-hmm. and it happens too with the stars and the athletes and that kind of thing. How are they compensated?
Oh my gosh, a lot of money. Let's just say millions and millions of dollars on those contracts.
Yeah.
And depending on performance, that then gives you how much that compensation might be.
Right. But are they compensated for being a team player, or are they compensated for
their
being
own results,
a star
individual?
Yeah. So that's, and we see, a lot of even mid-season trading going on in sports mm-hmm. teams and that kind of stuff. And getting that sense of team, then you could be just plucked out and put on this other team because of your individual capabilities, rather than your ability to work in a team and that sense of teaming. And we see that, of course, too, where that falls apart, where the team leader, the star of the team, or the star performer, in the case that you were talking about, takes all of that on to themselves and then tries to lift up the group by being a star performer, mm-hmm. right? And then demands, having the ball
all the time.
I think you have a story about Scottie Pippen and a clutch moment in a game. Was it at the end of a game, and then there was a timeout, I think you were telling me, and there was they were talking about the play and who was going to get the ball. He demanded that he would get the ball.
Yeah.
And
cost the game, if I'm not mistaken,
well,
right?
The coach said, no, the play is this. And he says, no, I got to have the ball. I'm the star player. I got to have the ball. And he says, no, go to the locker room and put somebody in for him. So it's developing that sense of team requires a commitment then on the part of the leader to the team, and being able to not only be accountable for themselves, but be accountable at the team level, and not just to be a star.
But it makes me think, as a leader, it's hard to take vacations when you're the team leader that is accountable, right? Because at the end of the day, if your team is not accountable, it's insanity. There are going to be a lot of struggles. There are going to be targets that are missed if you run the team the legacy way of, I am the team leader, I am the one that's accountable, and everyone has to reach my level of what I consider accountability. Versus if my team holds each other, or teaming accountability takes place, the results don't waver when the team lead's not around. They continuously will strive to better each other and do the right things. And what I love about the way that workforce equanimity looks at it is you have a team that develops, you have a team that excels, you have a team that gets promotions versus the one-star player that gets drafted over and over and over again. Because in a perfect world as a leader, I want my team to get promoted. I want my team to get those other job opportunities. I don't want to have one-star player over and over and over again.
So that does require a certain level of humility when you're talking about that, of stepping as a team leader, of allowing the team to emerge and to shine. And it's not just, I accomplished this and I accomplished that, when reporting up then, but the team did this and the team did that, and gets compensated for that.
Exactly.
And for that working together. So I think both of us probably have stories about where the compensation wasn't aligned. The compensation model was not aligned with what even the expectations were, in sales and other things. But for the team performance versus individual performance is certainly not aligned there, because we do a lot of individual compensatory types of things, even bonuses and that kind of thing. So it's going to require a shift. So this goes back not just to the individual managers and that, but to the organization and how it is that they decide they're going to set up their compensation schedule. Is it going to be for the team or the individual? And you need to balance that.
True. And I think, you have to be okay with letting some pain surface. It's like if you're working out, it's going to hurt, but the benefits are long-term, right? There are going to be people that are not going to agree with it, that they're not going to think it's fair. It works. That's the key, is it works. And you have to be comfortable enough to say, we're going to go through some struggles. It may hurt a little bit along the way, but as a team, let's look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and those people are the star performers who feel like they merit that individual increase, and they did better than their team members, and they should be rewarded as such. It's a meritocracy, where you're just rewarded on your individual efforts. But if we shift that into kind of a team consciousness, a team mindfulness, and focus on that. So, and at first you make a key point, when you're making that change, it's difficult. And focusing on the team mindfulness. Now, I'm not talking about going out and going zip lining together and that kind of thing, although that's fun and that could be. But on a day-to-day basis also, being focused around, what is the mood of the team and what is the consciousness of the team, or taking some time together to focus on that and to get together. I think you've told me about some teams that are get together socially that perform better than teams that don't.
True. It's, I think of it like this. If you're, just because the org chart says your team doesn't make you a team. And what I've seen in teams that I've been on before, the teams that will go out to lunch on a Saturday, not a work day, but a Saturday, the teams that would get the kids together and let them play after work on a Friday, those were the teams that typically outperformed the teams that were a team because the org chart said so. Being I come to work, I do what I have to do, I shake my hands and kiss the babies and go home, and that's it, right? There's a big difference there in that chemistry when you have those teams that say, I actually like Larry. I can hang out with Larry outside of work. We have some things in common, or even if we have nothing in common, we have a high level of respect and understanding for each other outside of work. I care for the person's well-being, their health. That helps change the workspace drastically. So even if you have a person who has a higher tier of compensation, it doesn't bother you so much, because end of the day, there's that level of I care about the people I work with. And I think of it like this, everything's in seasons, right? you might as well do great things with great people for the time that you're allotted to get the opportunity to do it. So take advantage of it, because it's not going to be forever. But there's so much learning and development that will take place. And lastly, you never know who you're going to work for. It may be the one person on your team you didn't want to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really. So getting along there, I mean, how many hours per week do we spend in our work life with those work teams versus even our families?
Right, more than our families typically, right?
Yeah, so why wouldn't we want to get to know those people at a different level and have at least an emotional intelligence about them, at least know what helps make them tick, and then let them know what makes us tick, so that we can synchronize and work better together. And often that is in that social environment, where you get that little bit of time after work, or even it's the water cooler experience, and we have to have that balance these days, where there's a lot of telecommuting and that kind of thing. When do people get together in person? But even in the virtual world, I'm getting together a few minutes early for a call, or just doing some check-in at the beginning of a call and a meeting, even in the virtual space, whether it's by telephone or Skype or whatever, checking in with people and seeing what's going on in their lives, and how that's affecting where they are today, emotionally and productively and cognitively. I think it's an important component of teaming. But it has to be intentional.
True.
Right?
Genuine and intentional.
Right. We have to pay attention to that, and particularly in a time of change, going from old models to new models, we really have to pay attention to that, because it can slip away and the established order can take over, particularly compensation models and that kind of thing. You just say, okay, at the end of the day, I'm being paid only on my own performance. So, as much as I like all this team stuff, I got a family to feed, and I'm going to go that way. So it's got to be intentional. It's got to be, back into the organization. Other models have to change, but you have to pay attention to that. So the leadership of an organization really needs to get behind that and support it, or else it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. We can have all of the individual managers in the world and individual teams, be cognizant of this, but unless the whole organization is geared for that, it's not going to happen, not going to sustain.
True. Yep. So hey, it's Friday. I think we should tell everyone, enjoy your Friday. Have a great remainder of your day. What's our contact information?
You can get us on the web, certainly at workforceeq.com. Look at us there. If you want to email us, it's info@workforceeq.com. And if you want to call us, if you're old school and want to talk on the telephone, I'd be happy to answer it. It's 916-226-9037. But visit our website at workforceeq.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on some of the other media channels, and so you can reach out to us there as well.
Alrighty, folks, enjoy. We'll see you next week.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.